Violence continued across Syria today as the United States welcomed a Russian admission that Syria's rebels may succeed in overthrowing President Bashar al-Assad. More than a dozen people, including several children, were killed in a car bomb attack outside Damascus. Elsewhere, Syrian jets pounded targets. A top Russian diplomat said the Syrian government is losing more and more territory. For more, we turn to Vitaly Churkin, Russia's ambassador to the United Nations. Mr. Ambassador, thank you for joining us. Let me begin by asking you about the comment today made by your Deputy Foreign Minister, Mr. Bogdanov. He said today, and I quote, "It is impossible to exclude a victory of the Syrian opposition." How would you describe the situation in Syria?
Well, you know, I think he went on saying that the Syrian government seems to be losing ground in the fighting with the opposition, and I think that this is an obvious observation. But I don't think there is anything in that statement which one can welcome or not welcome, because, well, first of all, that does not mean that the trouble will end anytime soon. The fighting may continue for a very long time still, and the battle may keep going this way or the other way for a long time, because you will recall that when the crisis started, the predictions were that that will last for 2 to 4 months and that President Assad is going to be toppled, but that did not happen. And then another important thing to remember is that even if the current stage of the crisis were to end in the so-called victory of the opposition, that would mean that the real trouble in Syria would only be starting. You will recall that after Saddam Hussein was toppled in Iraq, it was only the beginning of years of severe civil conflict and sectarian conflict in Iraq, which took over 100,000 of lives of civilians. So something of this sort could well be happening in Syria even after the so-called victory of the opposition. My point is that a political outcome, a political deal continues to be urgently needed in the situation in Syria.
Urgently needed. So does that mean that Russia is now prepared to sit down and work toward a resolution that would involve different leadership in Syria?
Russia has always maintained that it is for the Syrians themselves to decide who is going to lead the country and the Syrian people. But Russia has always been prepared to work for a political outcome. In fact, we were instrumental in putting together the Geneva Communiqué in the action group meeting at foreign minister level with participation of Kofi Annan, who was then the Secretary General's special envoy, which provides for the steps which are necessary in order to have a political conclusion to the crisis in Syria. And we agreed just recently with Americans in a meeting in which Mr. Brahimi participated together with Mr. Bogdanov, whom you quoted, and Mr. Burns from the U.S. State Department, that the Geneva Communiqué continues to be the only consensus realistic basis for a political outcome.
Well,
this is our platform. Yes,
let me ask you, Mr. Ambassador, if you're saying it's up to the Syrians, isn't that really saying we just let the two sides continue to fight it out, no matter what the cost in lives is? What is it, 40,000 Syrians have already died? 2 million have been displaced, 500,000 refugees?
It's completely the opposite. What we're saying is completely the opposite. The Geneva Communiqué did say that the goal should be putting together a national transitional body composed of representatives from the government and the opposition, which are acceptable to each other. When sometimes the future or the stepping down from office of President Assad is put to the fore, when people very often say that first he needs to step down, then our question is, but he is not stepping down. So what are you going to do about it? If we were to accept that, what would change if he continues to be in Damascus and continues to be the leader of an important group of the Syrian population at least, and the leader of the armed forces? So that kind of logic would immediately put that strategy into an impasse, and in fact would only limit this. The possibility would be only to fight it out, and this is exactly what has been happening. So our logic is that we should not put the Assad future to the fore. We should try to find common ground, political and in terms of personalities, who could be in that transitional body, between various groups of Syrians.
But my question remains, as long as there's a delay in waiting for that to happen, one side doesn't want to sit at the table with another side, there's discussion about whether Iran would be at the table, the shape of the negotiations. Meanwhile, people are dying in Syria. So the question is...
You're exactly right. Yes, this is absolutely the core of the problem, that on both sides, they seem to believe that they can win by fighting. And the idea of the Geneva Communique, which we still continue to believe it's an important document which we need to work on the basis on, is that they all should stop fighting and should sit together and to determine who is going to be the transitional body which will take them to the next stage of their political development.
But to understand completely, Mr. Ambassador, you're saying Russia's position on Syria, your support for President Assad is as strong as it always has been. You're saying nothing has changed.
We are not supporting President Assad. We are supporting a political arrangement which needs to be found there. We are against trying to resolve the conflict militarily. We think that the effort to make one side the victor militarily in the conflict, to try to topple the government and the entire political system which it represents by force, is the root cause of this entire problem. We are not supporting Assad. We're supporting the political outcome. The problem is that Assad is there. You can say he should go as many times as you want, but as long as he shows no intention of doing so, that would only leave you at a corner.
And just quickly, to those who look at this situation and say Russia is one of the obstacles to finding a solution because your country will not go along with the sanctions required to make an important diplomatic change there.
No, the sanctions would be completely irrelevant. You know, the government is under all sorts of sanctions. It has been fighting a war which has been very difficult for the government and which it's not exactly winning, to put it mildly. So to think that to change anything there must be additional pressure on the government, we think is completely irrelevant. What we need is to put political pressure on both sides and to persuade those in the opposition who believe that the only way to win is to fight is a very dangerous strategy.
Finally, Mr. Ambassador, let me ask you about a development here in the United States today. I'm sure you're aware that the U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Susan Rice, whom you know and whom you've worked with, has now withdrawn her name from consideration to be the U.S. Secretary of State. Do you have a reaction to that?
Not really. It is Ambassador Rice's decision. The only thing I can say is that if it means that Ambassador Rice is going to spend 4 more years in the United Nations, I'll have to ask for double pay.
Why do you say that?
She has been one tough individual in the United Nations, but we've had, I think, sometimes a stormy, but most of the time friendly relationship with her. So I would be looking forward to that, particularly if I'm given double pay for the additional effort.
And do you think the fact that she won't be Secretary of State is a loss for the United States?
You know, I don't want to get into that. This is definitely a domestic matter for the United States.
Well, Ambassador Vitaly Churkin, we thank you for being with us.